Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving to our today's first story, about how OP's buddy betrayed him and circulated rumors about him being creepy across the school, leading OP's life to become hellish. But OP got his vengeance with interest several years later. Now story. In the 3rd grade, I was an awkward kid, had a mean drunk father, struggled to fit in and make friends, and was bullied and shunned by other kids. One of my classmates, let's call him Derek, who regularly partook in bullying me, showed me kindness one day, being deprived of kindness or attention so regularly I was putty in his hands. He hung out with me during recess when I was usually alone. We laughed and talked about girls we like, and he even apologized for being in a hole to me. The reason he was nice to me was that I had brought a very popular, expensive Batman action figure to school with me to pass the time since I was alone mostly. I saved allowance and mowed lawns for 2 months to buy that toy. Everyone wanted one. By the end of the day, he asked me if he could lend the action figure, and like the naive, socially inept kid I was, I trusted him with it. The deal was to return it the following morning. I went home so happy, completely fooled, I never suspected a thing. The following day he completely ignored me. When I tried to talk to him, he acted like I was crazy. When I asked him to return the action figure, he simply said, "You never gave me any Batman. Maybe you imagined it," and when I persisted, he threatened to beat my bum. When I complained to my teacher, I was told that it was my own fault for bringing toys to school. I was afraid they would involve my father, so I dropped it. I couldn't let my father know, or I would be called a coward and have my ass beat and punished for the next 2 weeks. What's worse is Derek told all the girls that I confided to him about fancying that I lusted after them and that I wanked them. I was a social outcast before that, but at least I was tolerated. But after his smear campaign with the girls, I was a leper. People wouldn't even look me in the eyes, not even the teachers. Kids started throwing stones at me, sabotaging and vandalizing my property. It was hell. I did nothing about it but cry. I was just a weak-willed kid after all, but to this day I wish I'd bit someone's ear off or something. Anything in retaliation. After a while the bullying died down. I focused on my studies and started getting good grades. Derek started talking to me again, but I ignored him completely. Sometimes he would repeat, "Why are you being such a baby? You didn't give me anything. You imagined it." By the end of the year, we moved houses and I transferred to another school not far away. Things were much better there. I finally had friends and I was not as naive anymore, so I was not as easily targeted. But I was still mostly me and still got picked on now and then. Over the years I became somewhat of a delinquent, and in high school, I got into regular fights. I may have been overcompensating for the lack of a spine I had in my younger years. I bartended in nightclubs, hotels, and cruise liners in my early 20s. This helped me a lot to be more socially adept and to understand social dynamics and human nature. I finished trade school and qualified as an electrician and later as a plumber. I know, water and electricity. But believe it or not, I thought it was ingenious at the time. I started my own business, developed a reputation for excellent workmanship in my local area, and did well for myself. When I was 29, I'm 36 now, I received a call out at 2 in the morning for a flooding emergency at a local residence. When I got there, the place was a mess. Water was jetting out of a burst pipe and electrical equipment was shorted. It was highly dangerous. The living room floor was caved in due to a sinkhole. I was met by the wife, let's call her Jane, hysterical and beside herself. She somehow thought that she was responsible, which I found odd. I assured her that it couldn't possibly be her fault. He arrived not 5 minutes later. His demeanor was irate. He didn't greet or shake my hand when I offered. I recognized him immediately. Derek from all those years ago. He demanded to know why I have not begun fixing the issue yet. I was professional and told him what I'd told the wife in terms of costs. But I hid the written quote in my vehicle. I told him who I was and acted happy to see him, assuring him that he was in good hands. After a while of arguing with his wife, he seemed to calm down and joked around with me. I knew I had fooled him. We talked about our careers, kids, and our school days. I gave him tips and fake recommendations. We got along great, and his trust was easy to gain. He must have thought of me as a complete sucker. I assured him that he was in good hands and this would be fixed in no time. I was careful not to start any actual work on the property. Doing the smallest thing would make me responsible for all of it. Derek left after an hour or so and his wife stayed behind. I started my revenge. When I was doing my assessment, I noticed that most of the buildings did not comply with city regulations and did not adhere to the registered and approved plans. There were multiple safety hazards, and all plumbing and electrical work were completed by unqualified and uncertified people in an attempt to save money. Also, the pipe in question had been leaking for a few weeks at least, getting worse by the day and finally causing the disaster, which means their water bill would be astronomical at the end of the month unless a qualified plumber endorses a rebate with the municipality. I called my contact at the city, let's call him Donovan, and notified him of all the regulatory violations, safety hazards, and non-city compliant installations on the property. I also told him of the possible water bill. He promised to be there the next day. I immediately started photographing and documenting. The following morning my contact was there at 10. He had a field day. He informed Derek's wife of the calamity that was to come. They would be forced to tear down all the building additions, remove all the uncertified plumbing and wiring installations, have the plans reapproved, and start from scratch, which is an estimated loss of approximately $950,000. Derek was there in minutes. He was livid. He quickly threatened legal action, but Donovan simply told him that he had more than enough photographic evidence to have the property declared invalid within a week if Derek did not comply in writing. Donovan reminded Derek that he does this for a living and that the city has more legal resources to waste money on. I left Derek an invoice for my time just to smear salt in the wood and took my leave. Later he called me every name under the sun. I remained silent and he hung up. He went on a Facebook rant about me, which was a bad idea. All of the community stood up for me and it started a storytelling competition where all kinds of people revealed stories of unsavory things Derek did to them in the past. Apparently, Derek has always been in a hole. He never changed. One day he called me and asked to meet. He sounded defeated and depressed, so I decided to meet and see what was up. I met him at a local busy convenience store. I know better than to take Derek the Weasel at face value, so noticed quickly when he played his phone screen down on the table. I knew he may be recording the conversation. He apologized for his behavior, which surprised me, and told me that this whole dilemma has all but bankrupted him. He told me he took out a loan for the building additions and cut corners to save money, that everyone does it. He showed me the water bill, which was nearly $80,000, a problem easily erased with a qualified plumber's signature and endorsement. I refused. He got irate again. Then he asked me, "Why did you do this to me? I know I was a duck to you when we were kids, but I don't deserve to have my and my wife's lives ruined because of mistakes I made when I was a kid. What kind of person are you? You told me I was in good hands. I trusted you. You assured me you would help me. Then you stabbed me in the back. You quoted me only a few hundred and told me not to worry." I replied, "I said no such thing." "Derek, stop lying. You told me that it would cost a few hundred, maybe less. I heard you say it. You promised to help me, gave me recommendations. Why are you doing this to me?" "Seneca, Derek, you must have imagined it." I looked him in the eye. He knew exactly why I said that, the same thing he told me almost 20 years ago. I repeated just to drive it home. "Seneca, you're being a baby. I never quoted you for anything. You imagined it." He knew I was destroying him financially because of a Batman action figure he stole from me 20 years ago. I could see it in his eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. His expression was a mixture of astonishment and disgust. I looked him dead in the eyes for a few seconds for effect, then got up and left. I slept like a baby that night and had a goofy smile all week after. He tried calling a few times but sent him a text stating that further harassment will be met with legal action. "Derek, you know what your real name is, and what mine is. If in the future you read this and realize how I screwed you over, remember how costly that little Batman action figure was to you after years of accumulated interest and karma." The look of despair on your face when you realize why you are ruined was delicious. I cackled maniacally on the drive home from that convenience store. It was time for you to pay the piper. And if you think this will help you legally, go ahead and try. It won't, so don't waste your time. Or rather do. Waste as much time and money. I welcome being even more of a financial inconvenience to your life. Duck you, Derek. Now, here is the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know your opinion about this story in the comments section. So before moving to the second story, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories. Moving to our today's second story, about a piece of shit receiving their deserved karma several years later. Now story. Many years ago, I worked in the lovely career of retail. It's sadly normal for there to be a constant flow of shop scum that make you despise their existence, and some are so horrific that what they do is burned into your mind forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments allowed me to exact my revenge. I had only worked in retail for 1 year in this newly built store and was starting to settle in. Getting to know the great customers and understanding that some people shouldn't be allowed outside, which is a shy person who hates conflict, wasn't the best, but at least one of my customers was an adorable elderly lady who always made time to talk and was an absolute joy to be with. It had been some weeks since I had last seen her, but one morning, I see her car park in the disabled parking bay. As she already has a blue badge, only this time she hobbled out of the car on crutches with a pot on her leg. I didn't have a chance to talk to her yet when a works truck pulled into the disabled space next to her and out jumped an early 40s builder with their teenage kid. Well, this little old lady was having none of this and must have massive balls of steel and stood up to this ignorant builder and politely informed them that they shouldn't be parking there as it's for the disabled and he doesn't have a badge. What happened next? I can't forget. This builder decided the best course of action was to humiliate and insult this poor elderly lady in crutches, accuse her of faking her disability and claim the cast on her leg was a fake and that she probably milks the benefits system for as much money as possible. Then walks off putting on an overdramatic fake limp, laughing away with their teenage kid whilst the old lady stood there in shock. Sadly, being one who lacks courage, I did absolutely nothing about it, and that would stick with me forever. I tried feebly to ask a manager later to do something about it, but they didn't care or want to get involved. For years, I worked in this store, always seeing this scum builder come in and out. Fortunately, I never interacted with this scum builder, but I saw them often, and every time I did, I would always remember what they had done vividly. I would still see them park in the disabled bays, and even got to the point where I would recognize them by the large blue Mercedes they drove. 7 years later, I was still working in this store, and this scum was still parking in disabled and looking like an absolute cunt. Yet this year I was blessed with good fortune and our store was outfitted with some joyful equipment. Due to the high number of complaints, our store had set up a company to deal with the parking violations, but instead of having external parties coming in and ticketing cars, the staff of the store was given the ticketing machine, and it was our duty to go to the car park and record any cars that violated the parking rules. This was all done digitally and there would be no paper tickets on the cars. This was brilliant. As soon as I found out, I knew what I was going to do. It didn't take long for me to learn how to use the machine, and it certainly didn't take long for the opportunity to get revenge, and so it began. There were 3 rules for parking, and if you break these rules there is a lovely £80 fine in return each time it happened. The first rule is no parking in disabled without a badge, and I know well that the scum builder is certainly violating this rule, and it wasn't long until I saw him next, and as soon as he entered the store, I quickly scurried out with the ticketing machine, and lo and behold, there was the oversized blue Mercedes in the closest disabled bay, with no badge. I smashed their car details in with some well-shot photos and sent the report off so that they would receive a lovely letter of the fine they would ask to pay. That's not enough though, but fortunately, it takes weeks for them to finally receive the ticket, which grants me the opportunity to constantly ticket their parking violations. Because as you would expect, the scum would always park in disabled, and as I worked at the front of the store, I would always know when they had parked. After ticketing their car dozens of times, the scum, unfortunately, learned their lesson as their oversized blue Mercedes no longer appeared in disabled parking bays. But as you expect, the scum would still be scum and they would find their new parking space inside child parking. Rule 2. Don't park inside child parking without a child. Had this scum gotten enough, I thought? Of course not. They haven't learned their lesson and continue to be a complete wanker and park in the child parking, which we didn't have many spaces for. At this point, I knew all their car details by heart and would gleefully fill out the ticket machine as I skipped over to their car violating the child parking, and take the photos needed for them, including shots of their cat seats that bear no child seats in them. And as it became routine, this once again carried on for a few weeks. More tickets were created and eventually, they start receiving the fines. Fortunately, me being me, I am completely invisible to others and often looked over, and I have yet to be seen or caught. But as all good things must eventually come to an end, when the scum came into the shop, their blue turd automobile was no longer there in child parking or disabled. Has the scum finally learned their lesson? Would you be surprised if they had not? As it didn't take me long to find them. Rule 3. You must park inside a marked bay. And what a surprise, the scum still manages to duck this up. They would park over the line, taking 2 spaces up. Well, guess what? That's a job for me and my ticket machine, trying to park inside taxi parking but can't fit the big ass car in it. The boom that ain't inside a marked bay and catching another ticket and fine for the have one single wheel slightly over the white line of a bay. Well, guess who technically broke the rule? That's right, Scumbag did. And there go a few more weeks of fun, until eventually, Scumbag runs out of ways that they can possibly break the rules and our company hires externally to start ticketing cars, so my beloved weapon of justice goes to rest. Now I know what people are probably going to say, that all these fines are not enforceable because of blah blah blah, but I honestly don't care for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm being paid to do this, so either way, my time or money isn't wasted. Secondly, it did have an effect as they repeatable changed their parking habits. And thirdly, even if they don't end up paying, they are still going to spend a duck ton of the time and effort trying to overturn them over and over again, having to constantly be harassed by mail. Overall, if all the fines are counted separately and added up, they would have received thousands of pounds worth of fines building up over time for being scum. The cherry on the top, about 3 years later, I walk by this piece of scum on the car park and watch as they scream at some innocent dude in a high-vis jacket accusing them of being the one giving them all parking fines. Which put me at peace knowing this must have seriously got to them and cost them to still be raving mad after 3 years. Now, here is the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know your opinion about this story in the comments section. And please stay safe. So before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.